Hello and welcome to the Tech Lunch Podcast, where we encourage our listeners to learn something new about tech every week. This can range from learning about new and exciting applications to the advancements in coding and technology. If you are always learning, you will always be a step above the rest. Take the time during lunch or during a break to listen and learn, kind of like a lunch and learn, but for the ears. This podcast will open the listeners' ears to new and exciting technologies they may have not been privy to in the past. These topics will range from manufacturing technologies to data collection technologies and everything in between. Hello, I'm Nick.
Hey, I'm John.
And this week we kind of, don't have Ed, but, he's got some family to take care of. So,
he's here in spirit.
Yep, he's here in spirit, believe me. We feel him. But, this week we're going to kind of stick to a more IT-focused episode, because that's the background that myself and John come from, is the IT world. However, I do dabble in the OT and engineering side of the house. So, with that, this week we're going to kind of play in the realm, we've heard us talk about before, the Raspberry Pi. However, we're going to look at how the Raspberry Pi affects 3D printing and what it's used for, in the grand scheme of things. So, what are you thinking?
Yeah. I guess we could start with the question is, so what do you have a Raspberry Pi connected? What do you use yours for?
Well, I use Mainsail OS, mainly for my printer. You heard us talk about before, you heard us talk about firmware.
Yeah.
And with that firmware, I'm running Clipper. As you know, my printer is kind of new to me. Kind of new into this game, decided to jump full force into the firmware and Raspberry Pi world and hooked it up to that. However, that's also running a couple other applications that Mainsail uses to pull the APIs from the printer and can be able to turn those into like MQTT data streams to another Raspberry Pi or something like that, pumping as a MQTT interface and or Kibana instance. Yeah. So what do you use yours for?
Yeah. I like. Listen, I'm gonna go to Clipper soon, but so I'm gonna do that eventually. But so mine is just Octoprint. It's I say just Octoprint, but it's a Debian-based Linux image that I've placed on my Pi, and it does the same thing. Yeah. I'm gonna be very honest. I don't have as much a capability as Mainsail and Clipper is, and when I mean capability, I'm kind of saying like he's updating his firmware on the fly, on connected to the IP of his Raspberry Pi. I don't have that capability. I can monitor. I've got a control panel. I got a control prompt that I can kind of send G code to. I can kind of control things on, but it's not to the same level of complexity as a Mainsail would do. And some of those, I would say, meshes that you have, I don't get those meshes unless I do a plugin, which to me, honestly, it's a Mainsail is more of a full package in my eyes.
It is.
Versus Octoprint. I have the kind of route that I took with it was there are so many plugins that you can connect, and you've mentioned it already. You connect via API, so there's so many plugins I can connect with the global API key or specific API keys. If you have some security things you want to work with, like if you're trying to connect via your phone, you can make sure you do the right API.
For that, I'm going to go ahead and kind of blow your mind on this. Moonraker.
Moonraker
is a software package. I'm looking actually at my Mainsail right now. It's one of the software packages like Crow's Nest and Sonar that make up the package that is Clipper/Mainsail, whatever.
So it's like...
Right. But what Moonraker is, I kept looking through it. I looked through the documentation. And it's an API. What it is it forces your printer or your system, you probably use it in Octoprint, but it forces the APIs to become exposed. So it exposes all of the APIs. It takes all the sensor data that you're getting into your system and exposes the APIs. And then all as a single file configuration files to move data from point A to point B.
So it makes it simple so it can move quicker.
Right. It's an entire configuration file.
That's nice.
But it's an entire package that you load. Like I guarantee you could probably load into the Debian image that's on your Raspberry Pi, and you can pull all of the APIs for your printer,
and
then off of that and make dashboards.
That'd be impressive. Yeah, that would be impressive because like we think into the realm, and I'm gonna kind of take like a left turn and kind of come from left field here because we talk the IT side. We talk about so I've built a couple of my own kind of custom PCs, right? Mm-hmm. And I know that kind of it's a bit more processing power than Raspberry Pi, but the same idea exists. Like you've got that PC that you can upgrade, you can connect to. So in my mind, I at this point, you can create with that Raspberry Pi, you can make effectively anything, mm-hmm. Either automated or, communicative, I guess is the best word. Like so I can reach it from anywhere. So it's cloud reachable.
Yep.
So that's the thing is like, so I've built it on that side and then realized kind of the ideas that you have to kind of keep to your system, like the things that you need to keep security based. And then you think, like for you in your case, I think it's beautiful. We can kind of talk about the security of it because like on mine, I gotta kind of close it off because the security is not as clean on yours. You have kind of the outside, security kind of.
Yeah, the perimeter set up first.
You got the iron curtain set up to where it's not, it can't communicate out, and you have to force your way in.
Right.
Okay? So which is only if you VPN or whichever way.
Right.
So to me, the main sale, when I say it exists as a whole package, like I'm even thinking it has you covered if you're taking care of your security side too, and you could probably connect the APIs to some sort of monitor for that side
and
too.
And the thing is what I also found is you can connect the APIs honestly to, and I'll touch on the security thing here in a second, because you can connect those APIs actually to the power supply that's on the machine, but you can take that and hook that IP and hook it to a smart plug, so you can tell it when to turn the power on.
So that's actually a brilliant idea.
So it's an automated power solution.
And then you can have it read. So like when you have your failure G code that populates, I don't know if anybody's seen the M112.
Yeah,
I've seen it a lot because I've been kind of adjusting my probe quite a bit. But it says printer failure, and it tells you need to turn the printer off before we can and back on, of course, before we can resume function.
Yep.
Now, granted, I think with Clipper, does it have some type of auto?
No.
It doesn't have auto.
Not that I have turned on yet.
Well, it probably is something in the books too, because like I think there's
a lot.
Yeah, I mean it has most of your package that you're.
If you're an IT nerd and you love tinkering and stuff like that, I've kind of fallen in love with the whole Clipper idea because of what it is. And this is where it leverages the Raspberry Pi, because the Raspberry Pi does all the heavy lifting for the printer. My actual on-printer motherboard doesn't do a darn thing. It has a file that I loaded from the make menu config run on Clipper onto the machine, and it's connected via serial port. So that's it. So the Raspberry Pi does all the thinking, because the CPU on a Raspberry Pi can still outthink the mini board that's on the machine.
Yeah, and I think you have the
4.2.
You have the 2.2. Okay, well, I mean still, but all things considered, like that's exactly the point. Like you probably talked about when you guys talked about Raspberry Pi, some of the customization, some of the customability that you can do.
You can get the hats and stuff like that.
Yeah, like I'm thinking that you can create some type of dashboard for like what you're talking about with your MQTT, and then you can plug that. You can put mount the Pi. Excuse my French. Mount the Pi behind the TV, and there's your all-in-one.
You can use Kibana. You can also put it on a touch panel,
right? If
you really wanted to. Right. You can actually offload off of that onto like the giant tablets we have at work,
right?
And it's going to work.
And that's the thing is immediately you can use that too to help with your life cycle of your printer. Like it'll report, and then you're saying,
and it does. And the thing is Clipper Mainsail does actually, mind you, Clipper and Mainsail, two different things. They're just one's the front end for it,
working together.
But if in their package, it does tell you what runs you did, how much filament you used based on what your slicer said. Yeah. So it keeps all that information for you. So you have all that data and stuff like that. But now we'll kind of dive into the security side of the house real quick. We'll kind of dive into that for a second. I don't have mine currently set up like that, which I will here eventually, because I run my stuff off network. Well, it's on network. However, I have a security, a on-premise enterprise grade firewall set up at my house. I know, a little bit of a pain in the butt. Safety, yeah, through Ubiquiti, USG Pro, and it does allow you to do VPN into the house, using a secured socket, and then that's how I would get to my printer. Yeah. So I don't have to worry about exposing ports to the outside and stuff like that. It keeps everything kind of indoors. However, if you go into Clipper or into into the mainsail config, you can tell it what hosts you want to allow. So you can restrict the front end of the firmware to only certain computers that can allow to get to it.
But I'm assuming mobile devices as well.
Like all that as long as they have an IP address. Yeah.
Yeah.
So because all the phones when they come in my house are all hard IP'd as soon as they hit my network. So as long as you're connected to my Wi-Fi, you have a hard IP, and I can take that hard IP and throw it into the system.
See that, and that's cool too that you mentioned it, because like when I talk into, like, we kind of go on both sides. When I go to Octoprint, it has the ability to kind of, I don't know if yours creates users, but I create users, and I can create like a admin account as well as, like, just standard user accounts to give people like limited access to downloading those APIs or seeing those APIs or plugins. But on the same side is you can, like, if you're logged in as admin, it's open. So like if someone gets your admin password or gets that, then there's like no real coverage on that side. With yours, you've kind of created a two-form.
They haven't made a authentication package yet. I think they do have one, but I know they're making one for the screens for the printers. They have something called Clipper Tab now. So they have that type of stuff out there.
So I kind of wanted to jump into maybe using of it as well.
Mm-hmm.
So like our main kind of purpose for the Pi is to be what the motherboard cannot.
Right.
The motherboard doesn't have the processing power to give us all of these readings and send this data to us and connect to us. But the whole premise that we're going for is like, what is it doing now? Like, what can you do while you're, like, let's say printing, like during your print, what capabilities would you have with your printer, with mainsail and Clipper?
On mine, really, it's just the ability to monitor the toolhead.
Okay.
What the toolhead's doing. I can actually watch the G-code file in real life and watch the movements of the printer.
Okay.
So I do have that. I can watch it layer by layer.
Right.
So mind you, that does not tell you when things go south.
It'll say this is the planned layer.
Yeah, this is the planned. The actual is not shown.
Yeah. How many times have we seen the plan not
come to fruition?
Yeah.
But it's it's basic, material. I know with Octoprint, it's probably the same thing.
It's very similar. It kind of locks. I have a control window where, like, if there's no print, I can kind of move things around, change temperatures. I'm assuming that yours has some capability of connecting a camera at some point.
Yeah, it does. I can go in there and add it in.
Okay, so similar. I have to download an API. It has one on there that's in the control panel, but like for the dashboard, I need an API. I need something that's going to also pull that kind of source code or that source, video, and output it in such a way that it reads with the other data, so you can see your charts, blah blah blah. You can see progress, temperatures, and such.
Yeah, there's a lot more plugins for Octoprint than there is anything else. So that's what people are used to.
It seems like there's a bit of a cult following, and
now,
it's very customizable. So
I'll say this: I could have gone to Octoprint with Clipper for this printer, using the Raspberry Pi, and hooked it up to the smart home system that I've got and stuff like that. Because that's the other thing you can use Raspberry Pis for, is smart home systems. You can hook your printer up to the smart home, and you can go from there and go watch what goes on. So, but I chose to go the mainsail route because it's something different. You can still see a couple where it says Octoprint buttons pop up here and there.
Yeah.
But it is what it is. They did borrow from Peter to pay Paul.
I mean,
It's like Flip. I think it's Flood now. Is another version of that. All still using the Moonraker and stuff like that. But then you have like Octopi Clipper, where it's an Octopi image with Clipper on there that you can download and burn through the Raspberry Pi homepage to do that.
Okay.
Mind you, that is a really wonky way of doing it because it didn't work for me the first time. So I had to manually install that. Then I had to manually move the code over to the machine.
Well, how many times did things work out the first time?
Right. Surprisingly, when this thing came up, it came up quick.
Yeah.
The Raspberry, everything loaded up fine. There's, the fun part is to try to figure out what configuration you have to use.
So what was your difference in prints like? Was there a very noticeable change for you as soon as you went to Clipper? Okay.
Oh yeah.
So from Marlin is
the first round of prints, not so much. Because the first rounds, actually, I have some sitting right here in front of me.
Kind of got to tune it in, right?
Because I had an issue where it was 10 millimeters off the bed. Because what it thought was my probe was extended the entire time on my Sierra Touch. Not so much. So I had to go back into my firmware on the Raspberry Pi and disable it. And then hand level the entire bed.
And you have that probe on a fixed mount. There's no adjustability.
Right, exactly.
So that doesn't make sense.
So and
That's a stock mount.
The way to see this is there's the first print that it did. There's the second one.
So first thing that I'll kind of describe it for you guys. So you can see on that bottom level or that bottom layer, it just kind of dropped down. It doesn't have a very clear first layer. It's not smooth. You have some elephant foot, and what I mean by elephant foot or like maybe some bending. It pulls up from the bed or maybe flattens out and kind of ruins that level, because if we want to print at 0.2 millimeter layer height, that layer height changes now, and then it looks like your corners didn't sit in because that filament's gone. That plastic's not there. And then on the second one, it looks like a more full piece, more smooth. I know this is the bottom where the print bed was, and that's kind of where I compare the two. But it's a first layer. Like on the one that you didn't have it's not a first layer.
Yeah.
So that would be your first layer was not adhered to the bed. That would be my first.
But the thing is I'll say this. Detail. I don't know if you saw it when you went to anything else you've done with your new firmware you went through.
Yeah.
Layer lines. So, it's like the one thing is it's like the layer lines are not as visible. You can still see them.
Yeah.
But that's here nor there, because the other thing is,
and this top of the octopus here that printed is very curved, and if that was a stepper motor, or if that was stepped like that, sliced like that, like this, you would need to do Archimedean chords for it to kind of flow like that. And if anybody knows, I think we've talked about infill before. Archimedean chords to just infill in a circle.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty much what that does.
Yeah. So that's what it looks like, and that what I'm saying, and Ed probably would harp on this the most, is that a printer does its job when it can handle curves. Mm-hmm. When it can handle those rounded sides, and this is a perfect rounded circle for the head of the octopus. It was really impressive, to be honest. Now, if I can take and say the difference that I noticed, I'm gonna be honest. So recently, I've kind of gotten off of Marlin. I'm gonna probably go to Clipper, but before that, I might go to Marlin again. But the main reason I went off of Marlin is I got the Easy ABL Pro from E3D Online Studios Online or something like that, something similar. I might be having it wrong, and for that I apologize. But so the Easy ABL Pro, I got that. It's an auto leveler similar to the. It does the same idea as the CR Touch would, but instead of having an actual probe, it's a proximity detector. Oh, okay. So I thought at first it would be a magnet.
That's what I thought it was too.
It would make sense. You've got a magnetic bed. It hits a certain point. Maybe it's reversed polarity, so it kind of repels. And when it feels that repel of the force, I was thinking that boom, that's a level. But it's opposite. So when it feels, there's a sensor light that's green at the top of it, and once it gets to a certain height, it turns red. and it tells you that's 0. That's your height. But the problem being, if you're leveling at the corners and your sensor's off the bed, it's not going to recognize that. So like there's a bit of a trouble there. So what I thought is that I should go to the Unified 2 firmware that that comes with the that's preferred with the probe, and kind of turn it on with the motherboard.
That's from E3D, right?
Yeah. So Unified 2, and it has a lot of capability. It's a little bit bare bones, I'd say, but it kind of gets the point across. I mean, I've been using it so far, and it's been getting the job done. But the one thing that I noticed from even going to that from Marlin, I'm going to say that I wasn't on Marlin 2.0. I look at that now, and I definitely wasn't on that. I was on some form of gyres, which is kind of a Marlin...
Like 1.0?
Yeah, it's kind of like... I'd say 1.5. Like it's like an in-between. Like so Marlin 2.0, it doesn't have the graphical interface that, that gyres does, but like they both exist. It's kind of two different branches, I would say. But I'm going to go back to that at some point because... but I'm staying with the Unified 2 for now because my stringing issues disappeared.
That's not bad.
So I'm getting, but now I'm running into the problem that my prints are too stuck together. So the articulating prints that I'm trying to do are too stuck together. So like for me, I noticed that, and if I could have some type of firmware integrated with the Octoprint where I can kind of swap back and forth easily, that to me, you guys have talked about it, like testing. Like to me, let me try Unified 2. Let me throw it in this thing. I'm going to test it. Let me try a little bit Marlin 2.0. Let me test it. Let me see what Marlin 1.0 was like so I know how far I've come. So like let me be able to throw that in there, that bin file. Like I mean, it's like,
and the funny part is that we talk about trying all these different firmwares. The firmware trying would not be plausible without the Raspberry Pi.
Yeah.
And you can do that on any printer. Mind you, Clipper works on all printers. The firmware that you have works on all so many printers.
Yeah.
It's a universal thing. But the one part that, I laugh at because you don't see it unless you're running a Raspberry Pi or because you can run this on a regular computer too if you really wanted to.
Yeah.
Is firmware retraction.
Yeah.
The firmware is doing the retraction steps.
Yeah.
Not the slicer.
Not the G code that you're slicing in, because for me, I'm using
Prusa. And shit, sorry, right there.
Yeah, your firmware is just a line in your config file, or your retraction is just a line in your config file, which is impressive. Like, and honestly, for me, I've got to do all of those things. Like, I have to do that per slice. I can save a configuration bundle.
Yeah.
In Prusa Slicer, but what if I go to another computer? I gotta import that, save it onto something like a Google Drive, and then export it down. And then by this point, you've already updated and tried 2 firmwares.
And the thing is I've also going to the new firmware, going to the Raspberry Pi. I've also learned a small little thing about slicers. Y'all, slicers matter.
Slicers matter.
Slicer lives matter. If we really want to go that way. Now,
Truth.
Prusa Slicer, even though their box does support Clipper firmware, their slicer does not.
Yeah.
So, whoops. There's a drop.
And you're running the most updated.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And I went to Super Slicer.
Yeah.
Which is the same thing as Prusa Slicer with a couple more options.
Yeah, someone took
which I'm not going to hate on that. It's open source. It's open source. Guess what? You can do what you want with it. And they have the Clipper they have the Clipper firmware.
That's the beauty of open source.
Exactly. And now the thing is what we're saying right now, the only money you'll spend, to get a Raspberry Pi up and running on a 3D printer is the cost of the Raspberry Pi. Everything else is free.
Yeah.
Your time to learn it, if you're learning something,
it's worth it.
It's worth it. It's just how it goes.
It's going to cost you an arm and a leg right now. No, I'm just kidding.
Getting a Raspberry Pi right now is going to cost you an arm and a leg.
Let's that's a good point. So get a Raspberry Pi, full stop.
Yeah.
But
however,
what's the price?
Right.
What and which one works? Do I need a 4, a 2, a 3?
That's where the fun part is, because now you have something called the Orange Pi.
What's that?
Orange Pi
is I guess you could say an Alibaba special of the Raspberry Pi.
I know. Okay.
So it's available. They're cheaper by a long shot.
It spells pie all the way out. PIE.
No, it's just
I'm
pie.
just messing with
Orange pie. So it's and most people do prefer it because it does work. It's the same exact operating system. It works all the way around.
Okay.
However, we'll talk about Adafruit Raspberry Pis real quick. The original.
Yeah.
So when you start thinking about that, you're talking about, what are they now? About $125?
Let's start.
At the Model 4s.
Yeah.
I'm using a 3B Plus or 3B version 2. So I've got 2 of those lying around the house and a bunch of older ones. However, most firmware options, for example, like Marlin, Mainsail, all that stuff, we'll use that as an example because that's, I think, one of the more heavier loaded options out there right now, can run on a Raspberry Pi Zero.
Which is impressive.
And it can run, you take that Raspberry Pi Zero and stick it right in the case and stick a little line out and freaking connect to the network.
Yeah.
Done. It's all enclosed. No one knows the difference. It looks stock. In reality, it's not.
Pretty good too. That's pretty small.
And you can put it on. You can put on those orange pies. I think those orange pies are cheaper than everything else.
Because I was gonna say I use a 3B Plus as well. Now, if you ask me though, like, hey guys, I have a 2. Like,
use it.
Why not? Why wouldn't you try it? What's the worst that could happen?
Don't ever say, hey, because I don't have the most newest up-to-date thing, I'm not going to try it. Because, y'all, I'll also tell you this. Most of us who's ever worked in the tech field, 3D printing world, whatever, we have old PCs lying around, all right?
You just call me a hoarder?
I know I am. You can look at my back room.
Yeah, I got an iPhone 4 that I'm going to fix. And that's going to be I
got a complete server rack coming up.
So, yeah, you're right.
And plenty of random run-of-the-mill PCs lying around here that I could turn into hosts for these things. However, so don't let the fact that you don't have it run against you.
Yeah.
That's the least of the things.
What do you guys probably have a laptop that's like 10 years old that you we're about to throw away? You don't think it's going to work? Format that OS.
It's a very small OS.
Put this image on it. It's Linux based. It's going to give your computer another 10 years.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe not 10 years, but it's going to give you some time.
Damn near close to 10 years.
Yeah, because it's the processes it's running are so much lower than what your Windows operating system is going to be running.
I'll tell you one thing. After we're done here, I'll show you my 2 older PCs, because I have PCs back in the room that when you first bought them, they would run 2 gigs of RAM, and that was considered a lot.
Yeah, you tell me I get 2 gigs of RAM on my laptop, I'm going to tell you can keep
it. But that's what it came with. I'm running on those laptops. I've been running for years, Tiny Linux.
Well, to be fair, too.
And it runs in RAM.
Yeah.
So it's like megs. And it runs fine. And it does everything I need it to do.
Yeah.
I've had these PCs for freaking years.
Yeah. And you could still get that.
At least 6 years, but before that, there was probably 10 more before that.
Yeah, you could still get that to work for you.
Exactly.
So we talk about Pi, and that's kind of how we started. But the whole point is not that you have a Raspberry Pi. It'd be nice for that everyone had one. But the whole point is that you have a management software that you can run with the computer that you have, and you can give yourself some peace of mind. For me, my whole idea, the whole point that I wanted for me to do the Raspberry Pi with the Octoprint and the camera is I wanted the ability to stop my print while I'm at work when it's failed, and I can say, hey, I'm going to get home, I'll clean it, and I'll start another print. So that's so basic, the idea. I kind of went down a rabbit hole just to get that job done.
Yeah.
But it's opened a whole host of doors for me. And honestly, it's also saved me so much filament. How many times have I told you, the print failed, I stopped it at work, went home, restarted it, barely any filament loss.
It's like, if you think about it, we were talking about this one day, with these Raspberry Pis, I can always just run an AR camera on it, or an AI camera, and that tells me, hey, did it bird's nest? If it bird's nest, stop print immediately.
So yeah, I like that you mentioned AI camera.
By calling the API.
Because we've talked about...
Sorry, we're IT nerds, so we can talk about this stuff all night long.
Everything kind of
probably will. Well,
if you can get the AR, if you can get it to function, then like that kind of reminds me of I was reading up on relativity space, like Stargate. That's their printer, their metal printer that they're making rockets out of. They're making the Terran 1, I'm pretty sure, out of too, which is going to be a fully 3D printed rocket.
The one that they are sitting on the pad in Cape Canaveral right now that they just fired is 3D printed.
Yeah, that's absolutely ridiculous.
With 3D printed engines.
That's even crazier. Is we could just make that, but we digress a little bit. Kind of
on that topic on
yeah, right. The point I was getting to is that. Like, I questioned, I was like, how is it so precise? How is it so perfect? Because if it needs to be on a rocket, then you cannot have any imperfections. That is an exploded rocket if you do. Yeah. So for me, I'm like, okay, how do they do that? They're using AR.
Mm-hmm.
And it's adjusting. We've talked about it in real time.
Yeah.
So they've created Stargate. And it's looks like a Kuka arm.
It is.
Yeah, which is crazy. So they've taken other technologies and made a system to
using augmented reality and freaking artificial intelligence.
Yeah, it's absolutely mind blowing. So I think that that's what that was what I want. Yeah. I want to be able to put my print down there, and the machine's like, oh, I missed this part on that print. And I scanned it or whatever, and then start going. Scanning technology is getting better and better. So, I mean, honestly, if we can get all those things ran by the Pi or an image on the Pi, that's fantastic to me.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the goal. That, like, to me, I'm like, we talk about what we can do, what we've done, how it behaves. What's next? That's next.
That is next.
Yeah.
It's like, if you think about it, where we're going, and, this will kind of lead us to the end of the podcast. We're kind of at the 30-minute mark. However, we can talk about this stuff, like we said, all night long.
Yeah.
Where we're going. That is, we know where we've been, what we've seen, what's next. I think the leveraging of machine learning, like TinyML, those type of software packages, augmented reality cameras, machine learning cameras, stuff like that, machine vision, I think is coming next. And we've seen it come up a little bit for 3D printers so far using the Raspberry Pi or their onboard processing software. However, I really think that you're gonna pay a premium for those printers. However, if you can do it yourself, doing it yourself will save you money, but also get you comfortable with it.
It'll teach you so much about how those things work.
Exactly, and you become more intertwined in what your printer is and what it can do and what it can't do. It's like, that's why I kind of started where I did with the firmware update before I start mechanical updates. Yeah. Because then I can start slowly but surely fine-tuning the machine down to do what I want it to do.
Yeah, there are hardware limitations, but if you are, a master of, the firmware side and how to change those things, like you can compensate for over or under extrusion. You can compensate for temperature change. You can, PID auto tune for your thermal runaways. Like, you can compensate for everything that is a flaw in maybe a stock part or,
And I'll say this, on that topic,
Sorry, we don't want to continue too
far. I've noticed also something with running what I'm doing is the bed in the hot end heats up so much faster now. And it doesn't give me the thermal issues like I've had before. They're all gone. And it heats up in minutes. I don't have to wait for it anymore. Before, it'd be 2 or 3 minutes to wait for that thing to heat. Come to zero and stuff like that. And, fuddy-dud around. It ain't like that no more. So that's the best part. But, again, that's the most about using a Raspberry Pi or, off machine.
Those changes are easier to make, quicker to make.
Well, it does it on its own, so that's the best part.
Yeah, or on its own. That's what the goal is.
So, but, from my side, I said, that's the future. The future is going, to the Raspberry Pi world. The future is going to machine learning. The future is going to machine vision, and repeatability. Right now, we're kind of there, with repeatability, but it's up to the user to hit that repeatability mark. So, from my side, I say, hey, hopefully you learned something tonight. We thank you. I thank you from from the bottom of my heart, from y'all, going out there and listening to us, talking about this type of stuff. We enjoy it and hope that, you get to enjoy it and you get a little bit something out of it. Maybe one day we'll do a meet and greet and get a couple people together and we'll all talk about 3D printers or some sort of technology that we got going on. Yeah. Kind of compare notes. That'd be the greatest thing. And, maybe one day get everybody together and do a big print off. Bring the printers out. Everybody come up with their own STL and stuff like that. And, let's have some fun with it. Yeah. So, do a barbecue and whatnot. But, that's here nor there. Pipe dreams. But just want to say thank you. From every single country in the world that's listened to us, thank you. We hope y'all enjoy it. So for me, I say thank you.
Yeah, from my side, I also 100% agree. Thanks. It's nice to have a platform of anyone listening, because these conversations happen nonetheless. They're always going to continue. So it's also nice to have kind of not even just like someone to talk to, but it's nice to have some feedback too. Like it's nice to know, for me, if you always say everything is good or great or this is fine, you're not doing enough. It's like, okay, well, this is why we're doing this. You could be better, or you could learn how to do that smoother, or you could make your life easier. And at the end of the day, IT nerds that are in automation, we're kind of lazy. We want it to do it for us.
Exactly.
Like, come on, like figure it out and make it do it for us. So, like that's the goal. I kind of want to issue a challenge. I'd say automate something. Like there's a tedious task that you can do on a computer. Try to see if you can automate it, or learn something about automation. Yeah,
send us a video of what you did. Yeah, we'd love to see it.
That would be pretty cool, honestly, and it could spark some ideas, or maybe a collaboration or something like that. So that'd be cool.
I'm game for it.
But yeah, so once again, thanks everyone. Continue listening. We've got the Instagram coming with posts. I think Ed was talking about blog posts that he's got coming out, or he may have already posted that.
Y'all go take a look at the YouTube channel. Yeah. Vulcanara Technology Solutions. Do me a favor, everybody who listens to this, go hit up the YouTube. Go, subscribe to that. So we know y'all are paying attention. You'll also catch this podcast on there as well, in case you can't get it on your device.
Yeah, and if you don't like what we're talking about, you want to take another direction, that's the place to tell us.
Yeah, send us put a comment.
Yeah. So.
On one of the videos that we're doing, the podcast video or whatnot. We'll see it.
Yeah.
We'll respond back to you. See what you think. Maybe you can help us come up with some ideas. So if you do have any ideas, for this, we say it in the outro, email us, or go to our, YouTube channel, Vulcanara Technology Solutions, and put a comment on a video so we know that you hear us, and also that you have a suggestion for a video that you want to hear, or a video you want to see, or a podcast you want to hear.
Hell, if you have a problem with the print, let me help you.
Yeah, let's see what we can do.
Yeah.
So, y'all, I appreciate it. Thank you, and have a good night.
Bye, guys.
Thank you for listening to the Tech at Lunch podcast, where we hope you learned something about tech during your break or during your lunchtime. If you did, please give us a follow to prevent missing future episodes. If you have any ideas or something you want to hear or learn about, please send us a show idea to podcast@vulcanara.com. Hope you have a good rest of the day and continue learning.